I was doubled over in pain when it started. My body seized like something was ripping me apart from the inside. 7 months pregnant and completely alone in my dead grandma's farmhouse, I thought I was having a premature labor. The kind that doctors warn you about with somber faces. But it wasn't labor, it was something worse. Everything had fallen apart when my husband, Mark, left me. He couldn't handle it. He couldn't handle me, this pregnancy, or the way our lives had crumbled. After the miscarriage we had 2 years ago, I should have known better. We'd barely been holding it together. And when I found out I was pregnant again, he just vanished. Left me with nothing but a broken marriage and the echoes of a future that was never going to happen. I had nowhere else to go. So when Grandma died and I inherited her old farmhouse, I thought it would be my escape. A place to start over, to raise my baby away from the prying eyes of the neighbors who gossiped about me like I was a living ghost. But stepping into that house wasn't the fresh start I expected. The smell hit me first. I remember walking in and gagging. It was like something had been rotting there for years. Thick, rancid, like a butcher shop that had been left to rot under the sun. I scrubbed the floors on my hands and knees, trying to get rid of it. But no matter how much I cleaned, that stench clung to the walls, to my clothes, to my skin. It felt like the house was bleeding some kind of festering wound. At first, I thought it was just stress. I mean, between the baby, Mark's betrayal, and being back in this house that held nothing but bad memories, it made sense, right? Stress can mess with your mind, make you hear things, see things that aren't really there. But it wasn't just in my head. The footsteps started on the second night. Soft, creaky, like someone was walking up the stairs in slow, deliberate steps. I told myself it was the old wood shifting, the wind, anything but the possibility of someone, something, being in the house with me. But there were no footsteps when Grandma was alive, and I'd spent enough time here to know the difference between a creaky house and this. I ignored it at first. What else could I do? I was trapped. The nearest neighbor was miles away, and I didn't have anyone left to call. So I stayed, trying to rationalize every strange noise, every cold gust that swept through the halls. And then, the shadow appeared. It was on the third night. I was in the kitchen, gripping my belly as another contraction hit. My reflection in the window caught my eye, and that's when I saw it, a dark, twisted figure standing right behind me, its face a smear of something wrong. I froze. Every instinct screaming at me to run, but I couldn't move. When I finally turned around, the room was empty. I was alone again, or at least I thought I was. I should have left right then and there, but I didn't. Because for some stupid reason, I had to know. I had to find out what the hell was happening in this house. Grandma always told me never to go to the attic. It was her one rule. As a kid, I'd ask why, and she'd get this look, this haunted expression, and just say, because that's where it lives. I always thought she was just trying to scare me. But in that moment, I wasn't so sure. Something was up there, something she'd tried to keep hidden. And with the pain ripping through my body, I had nothing left to lose. The stairs groaned under my weight as I made my way up to the attic. Every step felt heavier, like I was walking through thick, invisible sludge, dragging me down, begging me to turn back. But I didn't. I pushed the door open, and the air hit me like a slap in the face, stale, thick with dust, but also something else. Something fresh, almost floral, cutting through the decay. I saw it before anything else. A baby blanket, folded neatly on an old, rusted bed frame, smelling of lavender. Fresh, out of place. There was no way it should have been there. The baby kicked then, hard, so hard I gasped and doubled over. My stomach felt like it was splitting apart. It wasn't normal. This pregnancy, this house, none of it was normal. That's when I saw it, a trunk, half hidden under old yellowed papers. Something was poking out. I reached for it, hands trembling, and pulled it free. It was a diary, Grandma's diary. The pages were fragile, her handwriting barely legible. But one sentence caught my eye, scrawled hastily across the top of the page. The baby isn't yours, Ellie. It's hers. My heart stopped. My baby wasn't mine? I felt something cold then, pressing against my stomach. Not the baby kicking this time, something else. The air around me grew colder, and I realized I wasn't alone. The shadow from the window, it was right beside me now. Watching, waiting. I clutched the diary to my chest, trying to process what I was reading. Grandma's warnings, the house, the strange noises. Everything started to connect in a sickening, twisted way. The baby wasn't mine. It was the house's. Or worse, it belonged to something in the house. Suddenly, the attic door slammed shut behind me. The room was suffocating, the air too thick to breathe. I could feel the cold fingers trailing along my skin, pressing harder, more insistent. My contractions grew unbearable, each wave of pain blurring the lines between reality and nightmare. As I fell to my knees, a final thought echoed in my mind, Grandma's voice whispering in the dark, "She will take it. She always does." And then, everything went black. When they found me days later, unconscious on the floor, the baby was gone. The doctors said it was a false pregnancy, a psychological phenomenon, but I knew the truth. The house had taken my child, just like it had taken all the others before me. Story 2. It started with the tapping. A quiet, barely there sound that felt like nothing at first, just another noise in a creaky old house. I was 6 months pregnant, exhausted, and trying to get through another evening when I heard it for the first time. Tap tap tap, just soft enough to brush it off as the house settling, but there was something about it that made my skin prickle. "Tom," I'd call out to my husband, trying to keep the worry from my voice. "Do you hear that?" "Pipes," he'd reply, not even bothering to look up from the TV, his tone dismissive. But deep down, I knew it wasn't the pipes. I could feel it. That noise didn't go away. It came every night, only when I was alone. Tap tap tap, louder, closer. It started to get under my skin. I couldn't relax, couldn't focus. My body felt like it was constantly on edge, like something was just out of reach, watching me, waiting for something. Then, one night, everything changed. The tapping wasn't coming from the walls anymore. It was coming from inside me. I was lying in bed, drifting in and out of sleep when the baby kicked, hard. But this time, it wasn't a normal kick. It was like something was tapping back. I shot up, heart pounding, clutching my stomach. My skin felt like it was buzzing, like electricity running just beneath the surface. I tried to wake Tom, but he barely stirred, his breath slow and heavy. "Stress, Kate," he'd say in the morning, brushing it off like it was nothing. But I knew something was wrong. Tom had changed. At first, I thought it was just the stress of the baby coming, but it was more than that. He'd come home from work, looking drained, distant. He'd stare at the TV for hours, barely acknowledging me. And when he did, his eyes would drift to my stomach, lingering longer than they should. It wasn't love or excitement in his gaze. It was something darker, something I couldn't quite place. The dreams started not long after. Dark figures at the foot of our bed, watching me with their featureless faces. They never moved, never spoke, but their presence felt suffocating. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart racing, clutching my stomach as if someone, was inside me. And it wasn't just the baby. One night, I woke up to find Tom standing over me. His eyes were glazed, unfocused, his fingers tracing strange symbols on my belly. His skin was ice cold. I tried to speak, tried to move, but I was frozen, paralyzed by fear. The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened. "You must have been dreaming," he laughed. But the symbols were burned into my memory. I went to the doctor, desperate for answers, but they found nothing. Normal pregnancy symptoms, they said. Hormones. But it wasn't normal. Nothing about this was normal. I could feel the baby moving, kicking, but it wasn't just kicks anymore. There was a rhythm to it, a deliberate, tapping rhythm. Tom's behavior grew stranger. I'd hear him late at night, in the nursery, talking softly. At first, I thought he was just getting ready for the baby, but when I peeked in, he was alone, cradling the air, rocking back and forth. His voice was soft, soothing, like he was comforting someone, or something. "We're ready," he whispered, and my blood ran cold. I started isolating myself, shutting out friends and family. They wouldn't understand. They'd think I was crazy. Tom slipped further away from me, and I was sinking deeper into something dark, something I couldn't explain. I kept a journal, writing down every strange thing that happened. The tapping, the dreams, Tom's late-night conversations with nothing. Then, the tapping inside me turned into scratching. tiny nails dragging against my insides, desperate to get out. The pain was unbearable. I screamed, but Tom didn't come. He just sat there, staring at me with those cold, empty eyes. I couldn't escape it, couldn't escape him. The nursery felt alive, a pulse of dark energy radiating from it. I avoided it at all costs, but Tom spent hours in there. The crib wasn't just a crib anymore, it was an altar. There were twisted branches, pieces of bone, strange symbols etched into the walls. The air was thick, suffocating, and the smell, God, the smell, like something rotting deep inside the house. One day, a woman showed up at our door, her face pale and gaunt, eyes wide with fear. "You have to leave," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's coming. I know what's inside you, and it's not safe." Before I could ask her anything, she glanced at the nursery and bolted, like something was chasing her. I was too late. The scratching inside me grew violent, tearing at me from the inside. I screamed, doubling over in pain, but there was no one to help. Tom just stood there, his face blank, watching. I knew, in that moment, that he was part of this. He wasn't my husband anymore. He was something else, something dark. And then, one night, I went into labor. The pain was excruciating, sharp and violent, like something was ripping me apart from the inside. Tom didn't panic. He didn't call for help. He just stood there, watching, as the power went out, plunging the house into darkness. I could hear the tapping, slow and deliberate, growing louder and louder. The shadows returned, filling the room, standing in the corners, waiting. The midwife showed up out of nowhere, pale and trembling, her hands shaking as she helped me push. "It's too late," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's already here." With one final, agonizing push, the baby was born. But it wasn't a baby. The room fell silent, heavy and oppressive. The midwife backed away, her eyes wide with horror, as the air grew colder, darker. Tom stepped forward, his face eerily calm, and reached into the crib. Whatever was in there reached back. "This is what we've been waiting for," Tom said softly, cradling the thing in his arms. "You were the vessel. It's not our child, it's something more." I couldn't look, I couldn't move. All I could hear was the steady tap 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 inside me, echoing through the darkness. Whatever had been born that night wasn't finished. And I knew, deep in my bones, that this was only the beginning. Story 3. I'm not supposed to be here. My name is Sam, and 2 months ago, I was dead. At least, that's what I've been told. My friends found me, blue and cold in the bathroom after I collapsed from a seizure. I woke up 3 days later in the hospital with no memory of what happened. Except for one thing, I was pregnant. Here's the kicker. I hadn't slept with anyone. I mean, I'd been partying a lot, sure, but I wasn't stupid. I'd gone months without sex. The doctors couldn't explain it, just shrugged and told me it must have been some mistake in their tests. But I knew something wasn't right. The dreams started soon after. I'd see fields stretching out before me, rows of crops under a blood-red sky. I could smell the earth, rich and decaying, and I'd hear whispers. Voices calling my name, telling me I was chosen. Each night the dreams grew more vivid, and each day I could feel something growing inside me. I went back to my friends for help. We weren't a religious group, but Donnie, my closest friend, had been into some weird spiritual stuff, crystals and tarot and all that. She told me to meditate, to try and connect with whatever was happening. So, one night, I sat in my room, lit some candles, and tried to focus. That's when I felt it. The baby wasn't a baby. It was a seed. I could feel it rooting itself inside me, sending tendrils through my body. My skin burned, and I could smell the scent of burning leaves and soil. I screamed, but no one came. The room filled with a low, vibrating hum, and I swear I could hear things moving, scratching at the walls, trying to get in. Donnie came over the next day, but the moment she walked into my apartment, she froze. Her face went pale, and she backed out, muttering something about harvest. I chased her, demanded to know what she meant. She told me that the land, the earth, it had a way of taking back what was owed. That sometimes, people were used as vessels for it. She said I was carrying something ancient, something that shouldn't be here. The whispers grew louder. I stopped leaving the house, stopped eating. My stomach swelled unnaturally fast. I couldn't even bear to look at myself. And then one night, the fields came to me. My room was gone, replaced by endless rows of crops, swaying in a wind I couldn't feel. The sky was black, and the ground pulsed beneath me, alive. I felt it. Whatever was inside me was ready. I didn't give birth in a hospital. I don't know what came out of me, but when it did, the world shifted. The air hummed, and the earth claimed what was its own. I haven't been the same since. Neither has the land.